Imagine walking the very paths that awaken your soul, where every stone, every temple, every sacred site holds a key to your divine essence. From December 11th to 18th, 2025, embark on your initiation into the 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀 grid, a transformative pilgrimage designed to activate your ancient body technology and reconnect with your own light body. Experience a private ceremony between the paws of the Sphinx, a star-filled desert overnight stay in the Valley of Wales, exclusive access to the Great Pyramid's inner chambers, and deep feminine mysteries at hidden places of the Rose lineage in Coptic Cairo. Engage in daily alchemical teachings, sacred rituals, and sisterhood circles, all set against the backdrop of Egypt's timeless landscape. This isn't just a journey, it's a soul remembrance. Are you ready to awaken the light within? Spaces are limited. Click the link in the show notes to claim your place in this life-changing experience and join us this December. Welcome back, Sacred Travel friends. I have a beautiful guest today, Rachel Sarah from Wolf Woman Rising. And I am really, really excited to dive into one of Europe's most ancient cities ever. The city of the emperors and the empresses. So Rachel, I'm very, very excited to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
You are a Welsh woman, is that right? And
Yes.
you wrote 3 books about Rome. How did that came to be?
Yeah, so born and bred in Wales. My ancestors, go back to the beginning of time. I haven't moved out of Wales. However, the Romans came even to Wales, all the way out here. The empire spread, all over Europe. And I grew up with Roman ruins, around me. And in my nearest city, which is Chester, there is the kind of only surviving in situ altar to goddess Minerva there, and she has always been very present for me. She's been one of my primary guides, and it just happens that my guides that have come forth from the kind of the animal and the deity realm have been, Roman as well as Welsh, but primarily Roman. So I've had that deep connection throughout time, and then that's been affirmed through family holidays and then through my own pilgrimages to Italy and to Rome as well. So I feel like hopefully Rome kind of adopts me, even though I'm Welsh to the core.
Which is very much, in essence, the core story and myth about Rome, right? About the adoption. So let's go a little bit into that. What can we learn from what the energy that the city actually holds when we dive into its creation story?
I think one of the most important things about kind of that energy of Rome is that it's inclusive. So the people of Rome are diverse. The first tribes that come together to create Rome, there's several tribes that are coming from different areas of Italy, but then as Rome grows as well, people from all over, come over. Like race wasn't an issue for them at all. They were accepting of other deities. They'd invite other deities. Other peoples were able to come in and practice, what they wanted to practice. You'd find, people of all sorts of color, shape, sizes, and ages in Rome. And I think that's really important when you are connecting to the energy of Rome. It's important to remember that it is diverse, and it has that empire feel about it. Like I said, you can connect to the city of Rome from wherever you are in Europe, because the Romans kind of went everywhere. They say every road leads to Rome. That energy is about expansion. It literally does. You can probably, if you're in Europe, you'll find a local something that is Roman near you, and that has a line, a pathway, energetic that takes you back to Rome, like all these veins that go back to a beating heart. And I think that brings us all together now. It gives us something that can unify us, just as it did in the past. And I said those first founders of Rome were themselves kind of immigrants. They were outcasts. And those first peoples were kind of they had farming families, but people that were coming in looking for somewhere that was a sanctuary. And I think that that's important for us now with what's going on in the world, to remember that everyone is welcome, energetically, everybody's welcome into these spiritual sacred spaces, no matter who you are, no matter your background, you are welcome.
I love that. That's such a beautiful, image where, we can literally see how not just these stories, but the energy of a place reflects as that sacred mirror of what it is that the experience that we actually live in. And so can you summarize for the audience who might not be so familiar with the creation myth of Rome, what that involves, who that involves?
Yeah, of course. So very briefly, we have a family that are the ancient Latins, and those families have a king, and his brother tries to usurp his throne, eventually succeeds. This king that was originally had a daughter, and that daughter was kind of almost seen as like an heir. The women were given that place of importance. She had two boys, Romulus and Remus, by the god Mars, even though she'd been kept captive. And she was able to do that, and they were kind of seen as the heirs apparent. Those two boys, Romulus and Remus, were taken away by kind of this angry, naughty uncle, great uncle, and put into a basket and thrown into the river Tiber, hoping that they would drown. These two boys then go down the river. They just happen to come to the paws of a she-wolf, Lupa the she-wolf, who my first book is about, and who's one of my primary guides. I adore her. They just happen to land at her feet. She just happens not to eat them. And she loves them, mothers them, nurses them, takes them back to her cave, which is on one of the sacred hills of Rome. She looked after them until eventually they're found by a farmer, and then eventually they come on to become grown men, and they become the founders of the city of Rome. So they create kind of farming villages and develop them on the different hills of Rome. Romulus, which is the kind of the brother that survives, he does kill his other brother. He kind of creates this city on Palatine Hill, which eventually over time becomes the city of Rome. Different tribes are invited in or are brought in, and it becomes kind of this gigantic city, then empire, like I said, based around this one sacred hill, really, but the seven hills of Rome. It's a fascinating story.
It is a fascinating story. And, while you're telling this, I also just reflected on how there is such a similarity with the story of Moses in the basket and the river, and also Horus in a way. So, so all of these great leaders of different civilizations seem to have that abandonment aspect, or even like the hero's journey from very early onward.
Yeah, and there's always that involvement of the deity the animal and deity, kind of deity and animal form, that is given this kind of divine, kind of fated destiny, to that city, that is kind of almost like trying to justify how big and great they've become by saying that, it's because of the favor of the divine. But yeah, also this, like you said, this aspect of abandonment, and this aspect of being the outcast, and then finding the inner king or the inner queen from that place that, even like Buddha had that, where he's having to go into poverty to find his inner king. It's that same story about we strip away everything, we lose everything to find the thing that matters.
Yeah, beautiful. How does that symbology of the seven hills, what does that tell us about the energetic cauldron that is held in Rome or around Rome?
Yeah. So, I mean, each of the seven hills kind of was a sanctuary, was a place for a different tribe, a different people. So I kind of see them as like this sacred space. So each kind of hill had its own deities, its own rituals, its festivities. Yet they had this place in the center, the forum, which was originally a marsh, which is where the sacred well is. The sacred spring is underneath there. That would be the one place where they'd all come together. So although they had these separate 7 hills, they would come into this sacred forum, this marketplace where there was this well, and they would even be buried there as well. It's like this separation in that you have separate tribes and separate hills, but this coming together. And I think that kind of that holds the energy of Rome. This kind of, like I said, this coming together of all these different tribes, and the 7 kind of weren't equalized between the different tribes. You have the Sabines and the Etruscans and the Latins. They weren't necessarily like just on one hill and just on another hill. There was some mixing as well. But yeah, I think that 7 is powerful because of the diversity that it symbolizes, the inclusion, the possibility, and the potential that it holds behind it. I'm not quite sure what it means in numerology. Maybe you might know more about the numerology of number 7.
I was just thinking about it. I mean, it is the power between the physical and the infinite. So between the finite and the infinite. And 6 is more like the number of the heart, like the portal of the heart, and then the infinity. So it's the in between. Yeah, I can see that reflected in what you were sharing as well. Go ahead.
Now I was going to say that each hill kind of has their kind of patron deity as well. So it's kind of like you've got 7 kind of like, I suppose there's an energy to those deities on each hill, like their primary deity, but then they end up with so many deities and so many temples on each over time. There's only kind of like, you find if you do go to the hills of Rome that things are quite deep. That you do have to get to the earliest, back like 3,000, 4,000 years to the earliest times of Rome. You are having to get pretty deep under layers of so many, so many like peoples that are, and times that have been on top. But you kind of feel those energetic, and it's quite equal in Rome, like with the feminine and the masculine. They are represented in each sacred place, and in the Pantheon and in the hills. There's not like, there's a female hill and a masculine hill. They're really mixed, which I like as well.
It's so interesting how you, from the very moment, speak about this inclusion and that diversity, because I feel very often when we connect with the Roman Empire, there is always that aspect of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've never heard that perspective. So I find it very interesting to open myself and hopefully also to the audience to like, actually, there are so many layers underneath, because that's also what I experience. Like every time I go visit a site, there's the things that we've been told, there's the things that we read about it, and then there's the things that you feel, and then there's more and more. And
mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what would you say, like, when somebody visits this big European city that is literally also pulsing with so much hustle and bustle and millions of tourists visiting every year, how do we find the sacredness in that overwhelm?
Yeah. I mean, Rome is an incredibly busy place, like really, really busy. But at the same time, it's like an open air museum, and there are areas, probably the most sacred areas of Rome are pedestrianized. So at least you're not having to avoid a car, and you're just like, connecting, you don't have to jump off the road. So, I mean, there's particular places that I would go to in Rome, but you can find quiet spots, quiet places. I mean, often the big groups of tourists are around very specific things. And one of the things that makes me laugh, like one of the most popular places to go to in Rome is called the Mouth of Truth. And you'll see people like queuing, and yet it's a sewer cap that has no religious kind of thing at all. So something like that, you might want to go and see it from outside, but I wouldn't bother with the long queues. Yet you go to near the Tiber, and there's no one there. and you think, gosh, that's 𝘁𝗵𝗁, which is like the blood supply running through, the center of Rome. So you can find places to connect, and I would be drawn to places like the gardens. For me, like, going to the gardens was a way to connect, because I could go near a tree and then go down with the roots, and that would help me to descend, through the different layers. And also, probably the most sacred places in Rome do still have that. You can still feel it, and you'll notice, like I noticed when you go around, that people are more quiet in those places, that they do go still. And I think they're picking up on it, even if they don't realize. They take a picture, but then they'll stop. And there just happens to be seats in those places. And I think, well, somebody must have, when they were planning this, for tourism, must have picked up on something, because, those most sacred places, though I think every brick in Rome is sacred, because, like I said, it's an open air museum. There's just so much survived. There's none of these high rises or, these kind of modern developments, so you will find it in Rome everywhere. Even just like, touching a random piece of wall is guaranteed it's going to have ancient Roman something in it or near it. And the gods are still very present there as well.
So tell us a little bit more about the Pantheon, and like if there is layers, like especially maybe the ones that you connect with deeply.
Yeah. So, I mean, ancient Rome is made of like thousands. They had so many deities. Like, just for like a door, you'd have the god of doorways, which was Janus. Then you'd have like the goddess of the hinges, which was Janus's wife. Then you'd have the leaf of the door had its god when you walked through it, when you walked out of it. And the threshold, the frame, everything had a god. So like when you're walking through a door, it involves like, 10 different deities.
Wow.
So I would make a start when you go to Rome or want to connect to ancient Rome with the Capitoline triad. So they were considered like the primary three deities. So by the time we kind of get to the end of the Republic, going into the Imperial Age, they are Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. So Jupiter's kind of embodying like the king. He's the benevolent king. He's the caring, kind king that looks after his people. Juno is she's like symbolically like the mother. She's the queen. So if you want to connect to like sovereignty, birthing, goddess of light and childbirth. And then you have Minerva, who is the goddess of intuition and crafts. So she was kind of the goddess of the trade guilds. They're the three that you may want to connect to. There are older triads, just depending on kind of what you connect with. We have an older triad that is kind of belonging, to more so kind of the earlier people, which has still got Jupiter in. But we've also got Mars in there, Pater Mars, who is the father of Rome, the father of the people. And then we've got Romulus himself, is deified, and he becomes one of the principal deities. And then you've also got a female kind of triad that is going back as well. Kind of the Etruscans are one of the tribes that came in. They're very much more kind of matriarchal and have the women as equal. So they have a female triad. But that's a good starting point. And then you have different kind of groups, of the diconcentis. So you've got the sacred 12, the sacred 20. But for anyone that's starting out, the Capitoline, and then obviously, I'm biased, but from a personal point of view, I would connect with Lupa. Lupa, because she is the She-wolf of Rome. She is the mother of Rome. She was considered kind of like the nurse of Rome. She breastfed Romulus and Remus, and then she was considered to breastfeed, Rome itself. So the fact they were survived and their prosperity was kind of down to her. So yeah, so I would connect with her, and the other goddess I would connect to is Dea Roma herself, goddess Rome. So she holds the energetic kind of blueprint of Rome. She is Rome deified. And so you can connect to her and her energy, and she really encompasses everything sacred about Rome within her. So they're a really good starting point, I think. I know it's quite a lot to start with, but
It's quite a
maybe
lot.
one of them resonates. And
How did your personal relationship to Lupa evolve?
So I always had a wolf guide that would come to me when things were challenging, and she was a white wolf, and she was just kind of just there, like, she would encourage me to kind of to come back out of the darkness if I found myself in there. And then it just happened that I was made redundant from what I thought was my dream job. So I'd been working towards this dream job, for a decade, and I knew it was exactly what I wanted to do. I got to this dream job and I wasn't fulfilled. I wasn't satisfied, and I was confused because this is everything that I ever wanted. And then I was made redundant from it. And again, I was surprised. I was like, oh, I'm feeling relieved actually that I'm not in this. And then it must be days after my redundancy. I love to read, and I was just reading about ancient Rome, and I went through the story again of Romulus and Remus, and the she-wolf she spoke to me. She said, like, this story's been told so many times. It's all about the man. It's all about the masculine, and I'm right here. This wouldn't have happened without me. I am pivotal. I'm the one that was kind of saved them, and I have an important story to tell. And I felt like I have to tell her story. And as I was kind of going through her story and speaking from her perspective and learning more about her, I realized that in being made redundant from my job, I was like Romulus and Remus. I was a vulnerable child that didn't know where I was going. I was lost on the waters, and I'd come to her feet again, as I had done many times in the darkness. And that this time after redundancy was her kind of taking me into the cave where I was naked, vulnerable, raw. There was nothing else but me, her, and the darkness, like nothing else, just me. And that time was for me to align again, to come into a place of understanding myself and my destiny, deeper. Like, why am I here? What's my purpose? And then she reminded me, like I said, that to come back out to the light, come out of the cave is just as important. And so I really, like, her story became my story, and she was like, you need to share more about me. So I kind of, in my first book, ended up writing about her, in devotion and dedication and gratitude for her, for what she taught me. And so that she could be remembered as a guardian of destiny, as the mother of destiny, I call her, for people that are also going through the dark nights of the soul, going into the cave, and to remind them of the importance needing to go as a path of revelation, and also, more importantly, I think, of coming back out, to serve our purpose, because it's so easy, I think, to stay, isn't it, in the darkness. It can be comfortable and cozy sometimes, even in the darkness. We can cling to it, cling to our stories and cling to our trauma, but there's the reason we kind of go down is to go through our chemical process to come back out, so that, I'm now telling everybody about this story. So, it became kind of like my destiny was to share, was to teach about it. But I had to go through that journey of the cave myself first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I resonate completely with what you're sharing.
Everything in nature instinctively strives towards balance. It's not a static state, but a dynamic dance. An ever-flowing harmony between the Earth's energies and our inner essence. The dance between nature and humanity. Chaos and order. The body and the soul. The steady rhythm of a beating heart 𝘆𝗵𝗁's nutritional supplements are crafted with this philosophy, blending the gifts of nature with human innovations to support your inner balance. Because balance was born with you. 𝘆𝗵𝗁, quintessence of life.
Let me see. There are so many gateways that I would love to explore with you. How would you say that connecting to the energy of Rome, or maybe even visiting certain places there, connecting deeper with the story, the deities, can also help us as feminine beings to either like reconnect with that primordial nature inside, or liberate the feminine life force that we so often dim as well?
Yeah, so I think Rome in particular can teach women about power, because I think that often, we shy away from it, and it can be one of those things that can be challenging about Rome and about the empire. The fact that, like you said before, that expansion did involve, going into other people's countries and governing those countries, sometimes without permission. And so we have this example, over the last, 2000, perhaps more, kind of this example of power, being a very masculine thing and sometimes a very destructive thing. So it almost becomes like a shadow. It's kind of given like this negative connotation to be powerful. And we can often try to limit that as women, like, don't know about you, but growing up, I was told that a good girl, I needed to be a good girl. I needed to be quiet. I needed to be well behaved. I needed to be kind of like seen, not heard. And so, my power was kind of dampened down a bit, and it took, kind of for me being the wolf, to reclaim that. And I had to switch kind of my perspective on power, and kind of see that, power in itself isn't a negative thing. It's what we do with it. Again, it's about our intentions, and it has been abused. But power needs to be in the hands of the people that are going to do good with it, and it can produce good. So I think Rome can offer us a mirror. That's what history does. That's what stories do. It offers us a mirror so we can see perhaps not what to do, but also what is, the potential as well. So, we have that potential like Rome, with these strong, solid foundations in the sacred. We have that potential to expand into an empire that is going to offer love and compassion and understanding and inclusion. And we have to make sure that we have that, integrity, using discernment. What is the best thing? What is the right thing to do for us? I think that's kind of how it helps us as women. It helps us to address power, kind of maybe trying to evolve our relationship with it. And even just that word, I mean, you say power, and I think most people will, oh, it makes you cringe, doesn't it? I think. So Rome will make you work with that and on that.
Whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. And I think I just want to add also, like, one of the things that I was very intrigued with for a while was how the Roman Empire was literally running on the wombs of women, and like the creational power of the Vestal Virgins. So I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So the Vestal Virgins, like, if people kind of like got asked in a recent kind of interview, who would you be if you were in ancient Rome? And straight away I said a Vestal Virgin. And and I love men and I love sex, and I wouldn't want to give them up. However, they were kind of like the women that had an opportunity to have their spirituality, their religion as a profession, which didn't happen very often. I mean, a lot of the priesthood was priests, not priestesses. There were a few, like Jupiter had his own priestess. But really, it's the Vestal Virgins that were holding kind of this the energetic flame of Rome. So they were maintaining the flame, and as long as that flame was alight, then Rome would survive. So their origins go way, way, way back. So in the foundation story, Rhea Silvia, who was the mother of Romulus and Remus, they call her a Vestal Virgin later in Rome, because that's the term that they knew. But it seems from like archaeologists and historians have looked back, and those that are feeling into the energy of it as well, that what happened was that in these ancient civilizations, they had a place of importance for the young women of the household. So they would be the daughters of the king, and they would be the ones that would be maintaining that sacred fire in the center of the palace. And this fire symbolizing, life, thriving, surviving, expansion, all those things that, that fire encompasses. So they would be the ones to maintain that. And then, there was virgins because they were unmarried at that point. So it's not about a sexual status. It's about kind of being unmarried. So you had the princesses attending to the fires of the palace on behalf of their father, the king. And then later on, obviously, the Vestal Virgins, it does become something that does require them to be an actual virgin. They spend 30 years in service. After that 30 years, they can marry, but they were taken into and they were given into service. They didn't choose it. They were given as toddlers, as children. And then they would kind of have this time where they would create 𝘆𝗪𝘁, which is a sacred wafers that were given in ceremony. They would hold sacred items, ritual items within their temple. Their primary job, obviously, like I said, was maintaining the flame, but they were there right at the heart, at the center of everything. Like, Rome existed because of them, and they had privileges because they were so, important to Rome. I mean, they had beautiful gardens as well. So I don't think it would have been that bad a job, actually. You weren't forced into marriage, which every other woman kind of was, arranged marriages. So I think it wouldn't have been a bad thing, actually. It would have been quite a nice job.
I knew you were going to have a more inclusive view on that one. So thank you for sharing. So early on, you mentioned also some of the sacred waterways, and especially like the Tiber as I think you said bloodline or something like that, which feels very much like the Kundalini pulsing through the city. So tell us a little bit more about that, that spinal column and how it feeds the energy of the city.
Yeah, so, as most cities are, they're always next to a river, because that river was a source of life for the original peoples that were there. They chose it because it was, we're talking about, physically now, they needed the water for drinking, for cleaning, for hygiene, for everything. Yet that also has an energetic imprint on top of that. It's symbolizing, a life source as well. So, I mean, for the ancient Romans, originally in their origins, then this did carry on a little bit. They believe in 𝘵𝗵. So every deity starts as a 𝘵𝗵. A 𝘵𝗵 is a spirit of place, a spirit being that is connected to a physical thing like a tree or a river or a field, or even like, the corn or an apple. Every single thing has a guardian spirit that either guards it or lives in it or is literally it. So the Tiber is the same. So it has a 𝘵𝗵, which is Father Tiber, who is supposed to have been an ancient prince who died in the waters trying to save lives, trying to save the area. And so he was bringing, he was the one that they kept the water from. The water went back into, it led down to the sea. It came from the sacred hills, the 𝘆𝗵 Hills, and further out into what they called Umbria, and all of these like waterways. So they had these aqueducts and everything, all the sewers, everything would eventually go down to Tiber, and Tiber would wash away. So they believed it had like this sacred ability to cleanse and to purify. So even like they had one emperor who was executed and he was put down into the sewers because they believed by washing him away through the Tiber would wash away all that he had done, the pollution that he'd created inside the city of Rome. So it's kind of like this heart, the ships would come up, the people would come up though, everything came and everything went by this one place. And I think you find that with the energy of like port towns, towns that have got rivers, there's this kind of ebb and flow, this coming in and out that happens through the ports, and the Romans are very good at finding those locations. So obviously it all begins with the River Tiber because Romulus and Remus arrive via that same river. That's kind of the beginning. The river is, the beginning. And then for the many people, many things, it was also the end. So it holds that energy of the beginning and the end.
Wow. The alpha and the omega, literally. And also kind of like the renewal over and over again. So which is actually it feels like it is the seven, like the gateway into, so from the earthly back to the spirit and this infinite flow.
And I mean, there's springs and fountains all over Rome as well. It's really connected to the water element. So it has got the elements kind of represented everywhere. So you've got like the aqueducts, and you've got all these sacred springs like Juventus. She's that spring right in the center of the forum, the heart. And then you've got Oceanus, is connected to like the sewers, and you've got Venus is connected to the sewers as well. And then you've got the fire, the Vestals, you've got the earth of like the hills themselves. And then you've got a lot of the temples up on the top of the hills, bringing in the element of air. So you can still see how the elements were kind of represented in each aspect of Rome. Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that Rome is the city in Europe with the most fountains.
Yeah, they're everywhere. But then, the aqueduct, it's amazing because the aqueducts and the water supply that the ancient Romans built, like, still survive and they still work. So the road, the fountains that you go and see, that water's still coming through the same route from the mountains down the same aqueducts that the ancient Romans used. And I find that amazing. Like when you think how quickly our roads break these days, like after 5 years, I mean, after months, there's a pothole. Whereas like, the sacred way, but I think they built with respect, and they one of the earliest people to invent concrete, but they treated water with respect. It's got these huge, like even like if you look at like videos or pictures of the ancient sewers, they're beautiful. They're works of art. I mean, I love plumbing. I have a thing for plumbing, like ancient plumbing. Like whenever I go to like any like historic site, I'm always looking for like the plumbing because I love it. It just fascinates me. But it does though, doesn't it? Everybody, like, we're fascinated with water because it's the element we're full of, and it's necessary, like the one that's necessary for life that we cannot live without.
Yeah. Agree. So is there any specific rituals or offerings that when you visit, like any specific rhythm with that you venture through the city?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to go to Rome, then I would say to take your intentions about what your empire, what you want it to look like and what it's going to achieve. So get really clear, about what you're asking for, and just know that whatever you ask for, it's meant to be bigger than even that. Because like, I can't imagine that the people when first created Rome that they thought it would be the empire. And I think that the deities know our full potential. So we keep it quite small. So I mean, why not ask for as big as it could be? So do that before you get. I would also, because there is so much in Rome, I would get specific about, you cannot see everything. Not even in 2 weeks, you wouldn't see every monument, every temple. Get specific about which deity you want to connect with.
Oh,
And
that's
there
a
is a
good one.
temple, still for every deity kind of there. I mean, the absolute place that I would say to not miss at all, you have to do, is Palatine Hill, because Palatine Hill is that original Bronze Age huts and settlements, that is the Romulus and Remus. It's where Lupa's cave is. You can still go visit her cave. But yeah, I would get specific. So like, when I go to Rome, I have very specific deities that maybe I might connect with that time because I've been working with them on something in particular. But also I do have my ones that I always offer things to. So, Mars, Minerva, Apollo, Lupa and Flora, are my kind of like my primary deities. So I always connect to them. I mean, and in my book, it shows like I go through all the different sacred areas and who they're specifically connected to. So you've got the Capitoline Hill as connected, to Jupiter and Juno and Minerva, the Capitoline. Then in the Forum, you can visit like, the Vestals, and then you've got the Fountain of Juventus, you've got Castor and Pollux, you've got various things. In other forums, you've got Minerva, you've got Mars Ultor, then you've got the Palatine has got Lupa, it's got 𝘁𝗵𝗁, and Apollo. So it depends who you're after, I think. But yeah, like I would head off for the gardens. The gardens would always be my place because the gardens are going to be your way of connecting down, I think. So get a little map and you'll see all the little green bits on Rome. I head for the green bits, definitely.
Thank you. Thanks for these amazing tips. So yeah, always very helpful, especially if there's so much to see in one city. So for the next section, I have some questions for you that are called rapid star fire questions. So it's kind of like an either or an easy question that I would just love for you to answer out of the intuition. And sometimes it might be hard, but anything that is just present in the moment. You're ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Espresso or cappuccino?
Neither. I'm a herbal tea girl. Sorry. I hate coffee.
Okay.
I love the smell of coffee, but I hate the taste of it.
Okay, let that count. Trevi Fountain or Temple of Jupiter?
Oh, tree. Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Catacombs or
Oh, no, see, I didn't vibe with the catacombs at all. I couldn't even go in.
I said catacombs or caves, so it's caves. It's the cave.
Oh yeah, caves. Yeah, it's definitely caves. Lupa's cave.
Sacred relics or ancient oracles?
Oh, oracle.
Wild woman or temple priestess?
Oh, wild woman out in the woods howling.
Your favorite place in Rome?
Oh, Palatine Hill.
Your favorite chapel in Rome?
There was a chapel that was right at the top of the Spanish Steps. I can't remember what it was called, but that had an energy to it that I couldn't explain, that felt older than the chapel. But go there and you'll experience it. Right at the Steps.
Your go-to guide or deity when in Rome?
Lupa.
Yeah, I figured that already. Thank you. Thank you. So, segueing a little bit into the chapels, because I think we can speak about Rome without just like mentioning the Vatican. What's your take on that?
So, I mean, I personally didn't feel anything in the Vatican at all. What, is energetically, I mean, at the time of Rome was around, there was a few things like, a shrine to Fortuna there, but nothing majorly. But a few things that I did feel there was absolute awe in the amount of people that were going there, that were just like that absolute like devotion of so many people that were going and flocking in pilgrimage, that inspired me, and I was in awe of that. And that love that was being shared for the divine, that. And I was brought up a Christian, and Christ still has a very important place for me, you kind of in my in my own personal pantheon. But yeah, that moved me a lot. And then also, when I went to the Vatican, what struck me was that there were so many ravens around, and crows, and jackdaws and all. And for me, like, they're connected to Apollo. They're his kind of sacred bird, and he had like a shrine in that area. So I kind of felt his presence was still there. And it just reminded me that no matter what name we call it, it's still the same divine, still the creator. You can, there's been, I don't know, millions of names throughout the tens of thousands of years that we've been in existence, and every name is just our kind of chosen term for that same divine creator, so we can all go worship in that place. Goodness, there's something really in my throat. It's bizarre. It's really strange. I don't know what's happening. I wonder what it is.
It's been really interesting. My
I'm
last guest,
curious.
the same
Yeah.
happened. Like, there was definitely some major throat energy releases.
Yeah. Gosh, it's interesting.
I also find sometimes, like, voicing different threads, even if it's places that we've been to so often or things that we've spoken about too often, there's always a deeper layer that's landing for self in a way, from my own experience. And so it's working. The energies are working.
Yeah, because I'm feeling like even like an itchiness at the front of my throat, which has got me curious. To be revealed.
To be revealed, absolutely. So let's tell us a little bit about your books. I mean, writing 3 books about Rome, it's quite incredible. What do readers find in these books? I almost want to say, like, what transformation is waiting when tapping into, the wisdom of the books where you were that beautiful channel for?
So, I mean, Pantheon the Romans is about religion in ancient Rome, and then the deities. So it's exploring how Rome, from its foundation up into the imperial period, how people of Rome connected to religion and spirituality. And I tried to cover from like the emperor down to the women that were giving birth in their homes, and the prostitutes, etc. So it's a real variety. And then there's tips and tools in that on how to connect to Rome in general, to kind of like the Pantheon. So it's a good starting point, kind of that one. And then my other ones kind of focus on specific deities, and there's more coming as well, because I get trying to give books to each kind of like to individual deities. So if there's one that kind of appeals to you in particular, they're all going to offer something kind of a different approach. So Lupa is very much kind of about that primal energy of coming back to our wild, untamed self, which is our original self before all those judgments, conditions, expectations. She is kind of like, she'll bring you back to that baby self, so that you are Romulus and Remus in the basket, and she will take you into the cave and remind you of what your unique destiny and purpose is. So she has a unique way of approaching that energy of Rome, which is about kind of your potential, your true potential, and your legacy as well. And then throughout kind of like my writings about Rome, I'm generally I'm interested in prostitutes, just because it interests me about women's sensuality and sexuality, and the labels it's been given, the restrictions, and then also how we need a reclaiming of that kind of like that sacred self. So I'm also creating a book, that's the one that's currently being written, is about Flora. She's the goddess of flowers, that created flowers, is the energy of flowers, but she's also connected to sexuality and sensuality, of course, because of the flower receiving the bee. and her temple is no longer in Rome. It's been turned into a rose garden. And that wasn't done on purpose, but I think, wow, what a way of her legacy, that you can connect to her still, even though the walls aren't there, you can connect to her through her roses. So she's the original rose goddess. So in myth, she gave the rose to Venus as a gift, to kind of pass it on, kind of passing the baton a little bit. So Flora was kind of like the primary kind of flower vegetation deity. Venus was a little bit of a minor one, and then kind of Venus kind of grew up and became and had more later on. So Flora is really about reconnecting to our sensuality and sexuality and reminding ourselves of how right and wonderful it is to be beautiful and how we all have our own unique beauty. Again, beauty is something that's often given a negative kind of connotation, that it's about vanity or it's something that's for other people, all these kind of icky things that come with it. So it's about reclaiming kind of our own beauty, the way that we are unique, like the flowers, like every single flower has a herbal remedy, has an essence that it's been made on purpose. It has something that it offers uniquely. And we're exactly like that as the flowers. So that's her teachings. And I said there's many more about different deities. Actually, all going to be coming out. They're all in my head and half-made Word documents. They're coming. But yeah, start with kind of Pantheon, and then if you see if there's specific deities that that you resonate with. And on my YouTube as well at the moment, I'm trying to do short little videos for each of the Roman deities. So I'm aiming for like 300 of them.
Oh wow.
Haven't helped me to just give you a tiny little insight into each one that so you can just find out a little bit what they're about, and then explore them a little bit more and trying to share them and give them the limelight, because often I think other pantheons do get a little bit more of the limelight, like the Greek and the
Definitely
Egyptian
true.
and the Celtic. So Rome's getting the limelight for me.
So where can people find you?
So 𝘁𝗵𝗁_rising.com is my website. That's a good place to start. That has a mailing list there. And then I'm mostly on Instagram and YouTube. I am on Facebook, and I have a Facebook community on there that they just all support and love each other. And I kind of just feel like, the midwife really, because they're all just loving each other up in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so whichever resonates with you, everything, most of all that stuff I do comes from my mailing list. And then YouTube is the videos, Instagram's for like behind the scenes, like here's a picture of me like in the garden. If you want to nosy at my personal life, Instagram's the best way to stalk me.
We won't give your personal address. We'll be putting all the links in the show notes. Well, wow, that's been such a pleasure to have you. Is there any final pieces of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
So I think it's important that like with Rome, like a lot of people won't go there because of, like you said, about the empire, and they can see the negativities that's there as well. But it's about having openness and allowance, that when we dig beneath the judgments and the expectations that we have, then we can find the gold dust at the bottom. And that goes for Rome, and it goes for ourselves as well. So just approach with honesty, openness, and allowance, and just be open to finding the magic wherever, everywhere, whenever, in everything.
Thanks, Rachel. That's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful closing. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom. And I definitely would love to dive into, I'm going to start with the Lupa book, and then I'm going to make myself all the way through them. So
Yeah, no, thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening and tuning into this episode. And as always, stay curious and try to escape the ordinary. I'll see you next time.